Ooh-wee, what's going on YouTube? It's Donnie B all day. I'm in here getting ready to cook up some lobster and crab, and I'm feeling good. And I figured, let's get a video done while things are boiling. And I broke out a bunch of, as you can see, different combat style knives, right? And ones that are called combat and this and that, and bayonets and different things. Oh, almost forgot one. Can't leave out the paratrooper knife. So now I have a bunch more, but it would be kind of redundant to just keep piling more and more on. And I have some that I would love to add to this video, but they are with the shredder in California. So I have a bunch of tops, and I would love to bring out the Mission Team 21 because it's a combat knife. It's an actual combat knife, and I really like that one, but it's not here. So imagine it, if you will. So what I want to do is I want to talk to you about different kinds of combat knives, because, you know, I will tell you all day long that this, you know, they call it a fighting knife, combat fighting knife, whatever. I'll tell you all day long that it's not a fighting knife, but it's still a combat knife, and I'll explain it. I'll tell you all day long that they call this a combat knife, and it's not a combat knife, but it is a combat knife. I'll explain it. And then you have knives like these that are survival knives, that are more combat knives than a lot of combat knives, and I will explain it. So there's different things now. Let me check who's rolling around. So now you have different kinds of combat knives. You have oh, hold on a minute. All right, so you have different things like field knives. You have tactical fighting knives. You have utility combat knives, paratrooper knives, bayonets, all kinds of stuff, and all the way down to like combat fighting knife in different styles. It's still a combat knife, right? But it's different than like what you'd think of as a fighting knife. Like a lot of people, if I'll talk about, like I just did a design for a future combat blade that I plan on producing, and it had these pinch serrations on it, which pinch and go like this, and they go on each side, not like a regular saw. Like on this one, on this bayonet, you see how these pull back. Now a lot of people complain that when you go in and out, oh, you're going to get stuck on bone and stuck on clothing and this and that, and it's going to get stuck and you really have to pull and rip. Duh, that's the object, because you want to create as much carnage as possible coming out. If I'm ripping tendons and muscles and everything trying to pull this blade out, that's great. Is it going to get stuck to the point where you can't get it out? You shouldn't be in combat if you can't pull a knife out of a piece of cloth. You shouldn't be in combat. So the pinch, instead of closing in on the teeth come in on each other, which makes it a smoother pull back. Like if I pull back on this one, it just rips the skin, right? If I just do this, I could just, you see my finger bouncing? It's not smooth like this. On a pinch, it's the same both directions. It's smooth, but if you twist, then you're taking all those little pinch edges and you are tearing things up. So, and it's great for like lashing, wire bending, things like that. Really, really, really good. So I designed one that I would love to see. Big fat front end, you know, nice thick wide blade. And there's different things. The reason I say there's different things that each blade can do. A skinny blade like this one, the Glock field knife, which is an excellent freaking combat field knife. You see how narrow it is? This thing is gonna suck when you have to do trenching tool work with it. You don't have your e-tool, which is your shovel. You need to dig a hole for either pooping in or digging a hole for a line for a detonation cord, anything to that matter. You want a knife that's going to be a little bit wider, because you want to be able to scoop as much dirt as possible, because you want to sit there for 3 days doing that, because A, now you're a target, and B, you're wasting a whole lot of energy. So the thinner knives aren't good for that kind of thing. It's not a true, like a utility combat all the way around combat knife. This has combat specifics, the same as this guy right here. This guy right here is a utility knife, great for busting open cans, great for pounding in tent spikes, great for doing cutting stuff like that. But it's not a trenching tool. It's not a menacing ripping apart tool. This isn't, you know, it's not your fighting knife. The balance is terrible for a fighting knife, but for the purpose it was made, it's really good. It can do exactly what it's supposed to do. And if this is the only blade you have on you and somebody's in, and you can get them up tight and you don't have to worry about distance fighting, then it's good. It's still going to pierce through somebody. It's got a crazy nice tip, and it's good. This can rip open. Now remember, more people are killed by shovels than they are by knives in combat. Remember that. So when you think, oh yeah, you got to have a knife for combat, for fighting, that's not really what we always use knives for in combat. Some of us do have combat knives that have gone through stuff, that do have, you know, a little blood stain on the grip. And those stains are earned, believe me. But different knives are for different reasons. Hold on. The lobster's in. Now it's just the crab legs. All right, so you have, so the reason I created this knife was to correct the wrongs of the K-bar, right? So now, not only is this a good trenching tool, but it's also a good fighting tool. And it'll also do everything this thing can do, but this one's just a little bit better, right? I mean, for me, it's a lot of bit better. The guard will not bend on you. Those guards bend all the time. But this thing is just awesome. I would take this into combat any day, understanding that this is a combat utility knife that I can fight with. But when it comes down to, do I need to bend wire? Do I, you know, pretty much bending wire and creating unfixable wounds is the only thing this isn't really for. I mean, now you can still twist and give yourself a nice Black Widow, you know, the hourglass shape, a wound. And those are really hard to fix, but something with the serrations are going to be more of a survival tool rather than just a combat tool. So this one, while it's a great combat tool, and this would pass the Geneva Convention because the Geneva Convention says no more serrations because it creates too much carnage on the enemy. So you're saying you hurt your enemy too much when trying to kill them. Stupid Geneva Convention, so dumb. But so this would actually pass. This is a fine blade for that. This thing right here, out of all these, I would probably take into combat before pretty much any one of them. So this is more like a combat utility. This would be more of a combat utility / field knife. That is a dropped knife. So this is a field knife. The difference between these three, this one is a really, really good fighting knife, where these two are really, really good utility knives, right? So you see the difference? This is great for utility. These are great for utility. This is a great fighting knife. Great fighting knife. These are not. So it separates those kind of categories. Then you get into the Paratrooper. And the Paratrooper is just a straight up self-defense knife. This isn't going to be your utility knife. It's not going to be your survival knife, anything like that. And remember, when I say survival, combat is survival. If you are in a combat situation where you might get trapped, they did a whole movie with Mark Wahlberg where a bunch of guys got trapped, and you had to survive with whatever you had on you, right? So if you get stuck somewhere, if you didn't have a village to call home for a little while to protect you, guess what? You're stuck with just what you have on you. You might want one of those sawback knives so you can start getting up your, start maybe sawing out some wood and collecting, do whatever you got to do to help you survive. That's why survival knives have a lot of sawbacks or a lot of, serrations on the spines. It's because you need it for survival, right? So this guy right here, the Paratrooper, while I would absolutely carry this with me, the Paratrooper knife isn't so much of a survival knife as it is a combat defense knife. It's not even, I would say, a fighting knife. This is more of a combat defense knife, hurry up and get one up under a chin somewhere, and that's what that's good for. So I just did this, a short video, just an intro on this Gerber LHR, right? And after somebody pointed out the Special Forces knife that Chris Reeves does, a lot of this blade is pretty much the same thing. So I was wondering if this blade shape came from Harsey, and but I think it's a Reeves thing because it looks just like that. From like here this way, it looks like Reeves knife, which is a great freaking knife. The problem with this knife is from here to here. That's terrible. It's honestly, I don't like, there's pretty much nothing about this I like. So between Larson and Harsey, I'm guessing that they came up with this, and this is not good. This part is really good. I was liking this as a fighting knife. It's fantastic. They call it a combat knife. If they just worded it a little different, like a tactical fighting knife, I think that you are balls deep in tactical fighting knife right here. And does that change anything? No. But as a combat knife, it's not a good combat knife. There's too many things that curl back, and that can get you when you're trying to move fast. It's just not very good as a combat knife. Now, as a combat, like just straight up fighting knife, absolutely. Can you have this in combat and use it for distance fighting? Yeah, this shouldn't be an emergency pullout just because of this kind of stuff. This isn't the kind of thing you want to reach for frantically, right? Because you can jack yourself up. That is not something any soldier I could ever name or think of would want something curling back at a point at their hand. That it's stupid. But if I knew somebody was coming at me and I had the time to draw and relax, and I could put it any way I wanted, if I had that kind of time, yeah. Generally, the problem is if you're pulling the knife out in combat, it's because time is already over and you're fighting for your life. That's why I think this is a really, really good tactical fighting knife, but in no way a combat knife. We just went over this guy right here, bayonet. What makes this not as good of a combat knife as some of the others is the fact that it's a bayonet, which means it comes to a point because the bayonet is made to, bam, just be for that. It's not a slashing, thrashing blade. It's just made to stick. When it's not on the end of the rifle, it's supposed to be a survival knife. Hence the survival knife properties. You have this guy right here, this Fuller. While it does reduce weight, and you can literally turn a bolt with that. Different size nuts just by turning. You have your wire cutter here. You have your saw back here. You have everything that you would want, lashing points, in a survival knife in this package. As a matter of fact, when I designed my combat knife, I was thinking of the M9. The M9 was like, man, if I could do an M9 better with a nice round drop point instead of a clip point, if I could do it a little deeper, give it a wider blade, a bigger stance, but still keep the point centered. And I love this pattern here. So I went with a full tang micarta, but I kept like these grooves here because it really says M9. And so this is what I was thinking when I developed mine. It's in my community. If you haven't seen it, you can check it out. But of course I did the pinch serrations and I did some jimping here, and I completely changed, well, pretty much the whole knife, but I was thinking of this when I did it. But this is great. The bayonet is great. It's great for thrusting. It's a really, really good piece for combat as far as a combat survival knife. And that's where we start changing from combat utility to field knives to combat just fighting knives, combat survival knife, right? And then you have some knives that are just true straight up combat hip blades, and this is where the size comes in. This guy right here, and you'll notice, let's take this guy out right here. I know I'm picking on it, but you see this tip? When it comes down to using it as a trenching tool or using it as a forging tool or anything like that, picking out landmines and things like that where you have to do a little prying, that skinny tip is no bueno. You see the difference? Look at the difference, tip for tip. Right? You see how much more meat there is in this? This is a Gerber. This is a Gerber. This was my issued knife in Afghanistan. This thing is phenomenal. This is a great combat knife. It's really close to combat survival. Instead of teeth, for the Geneva Convention, they just put serrations here to make up for that. So you still kind of have it. It could be more. Wire bending, things like that, you have these holes for. Lashing points, you have these holes for. You do have, when it's in the sheath, and the sheath is the same setup as this. I just take off all the rigging because I don't really like it. But you see this nice flat part right there. Bam, bam, bam. Tent spikes, things like that. This is a point, but when frantic, because it's angled here, you see this? Your hand doesn't get stuck on that. There's nothing getting stuck. It's one point, and it's surrounded by rounded edges and flat portions. Makes it really, really useful. Coming down, my hand never, ever hits this. And I wore this high on the belt, so I'm coming down on it. So when I needed it, it was right there. And it worked out to be a really good slasher. And, well, that's how it got all bloody. So this one right here, and this is glass reinforced nylon, where this, wherever I just put it, beats the hell out of me. This thing is, I can't remember what it's, some kind of hide they called it, but it's basically like a rubber. I don't like that. I don't like that. Now this is shock proof, which means if you cut into a live wire, you're not going to get electrocuted while holding this. This is really good. It has great grip. The glass reinforced nylon is excellent in this grip. Freaking love it. This one right here, they say it's to prevent slipping when it's wet, but I can't get it to prevent slipping when it's dry. And a lot of it is going to be, you see, whoever designed these lines here, they designed lines that go in the same direction as your hand. Why would you do that? You're forcing your hand to glide along these ridges. That is a really, really poor developing right there in that grip. If you're going to do those lines, make them go up and down so they grab the meat of the hand, not assist with losing it. I don't know. There are so many problems I have with that design. Now we're talking this guy right here, the Buck Ground Combat. Make sure my time is good. The Buck Ground Combat, you're saying, okay, but how is it a combat knife? It's really narrow. Because this is a combat, this is one of those knives where, again, inside, this is going to be your combat, fighting, survival knife. And it's different than a fighting knife because there's no guard. It's small. So when you're talking about a difference between a fighting knife and a combat knife, this is a great combat knife for combat, not combat survival, but combat fighting. Similar to how this would be, but this one's just better than that. I mean, it does have a nice enough swell to keep your hand locked in. What really works about this is the grip. Buck did an amazing job on this. There's nothing that's going to get your hand. There's nothing that's going to hurt you when moving quickly and frantically. They make a Tonto tip and they make it's kind of a spear tip. They make a spear tip version. The spear tip version is way better for combat application. The Tonto tip, I guess if you wanted to use it for like defense survival, I guess that would be fine. But this one right here, so much better for like a military application. This knife is fantastic. This is not going to be my trenching tool. This is not going to be a combat survival knife. This is going to be a combat stay alive knife. And stay alive person to person, not stay alive when you're trapped in the woods. So there's a big kind of difference in like where you're going to survive and how. This thing is awesome. You'll notice that all this rigging, like a lot of the MPs do this, and officers who aren't really in combat, guys who don't really go to the front lines to fight, wear crap all over their bodies. Dumb. We like to either put it right on the belt or attach it to our gear when you're really going to fight, because things dangling off of you and sitting on you, it makes you wider. You can't get through places. It makes you more clumsy. You're going through a doorway and it's banging and making noise. These things, while they look cool and, oh yeah, it's strapped to my leg and it looks pretty boss, that is not good. That is not good, especially when you're dry. Like I drove MRAPs in Afghanistan, right? There's no way in that tiny cockpit, that thin area, or if you're in a Humvee and you got crap, you got your 9mm on one side and a knife on the other side, and that's stupid, man. Either make it MOLLE compatible, boop, right there, out of the way. I could have it like this. I could grab it like this. I could uppercut. That makes a whole lot of sense. The other one does not. Now, I'm going to show you two knives that aren't even considered to be combat knives, not even close. Hold on. All right, so these are considered survival knives, like regular, you go out in the woods, survival knives. But I have to say, for a survival knife, this one is jump compatible, right? But these two right here, this is a spear point Schrade, one-piece construction, hollow handle. It's like an extreme survival or survivalist, I think is what it's called. This knife is amazing. I would take this in a combat situation any freaking day of the week. The only hindrance with this knife is weight. That's it. It's the only hindrance. And it's probably a lot because of this big old knot right here that screws it in. This knife, while it's called survival knife, is a great, great military survival knife. You do have your serrations here to make up for no sawback. Where you lack is there's nothing like to wire bend or lashing points or anything like that. But this is a really good knife. I would not feel bad about having this with me, especially knowing that it's hollow handled, single piece construction, drop forged, so I can carry some small stuff with me. That would be insanely good. The other one is this one, Kislyak Survival. Kislyak Supreme Survival X. This is like a Russian survival knife. This thing is literally everything you would need. You have lashing points, you have bending points, you have a really nice wide tip, so you can use this as a trenching tool. It's extremely strong, hollow handled blade, so I can stuff things in there. You have a pinched area right here, swedged area, so you can use it for striking. The only thing it would be missing would be something to tear people apart, as far as like a nice jagged area of the knife, or something for, notching wood or sawing through small limbs, but that's what batoning is for, so it wouldn't matter. This guy right here, and this is no joke, I would take this over 90% of the knives I see being called combat knives. And this is a survival knife, but this is a true combat survival knife. This thing is awesome. If you have the chance to grab one of these, and I'll try to get a good right there, Kislyak Supreme, so you can see what it is. And it's like the Survival X. This knife, among pretty much any other hollow handle blade, I would recommend this. Even though I did a versus, and this is the one I chose, and the only reason I chose it is because it is drop forged. I have stuff in there. It's drop forged, it's all one piece, so there's a lot to trust there. But I've beaten the snot out of this knife, and nothing. I mean, it's not going anywhere. This thing is amazing. If you have a chance to grab one, I'm telling you, grab one of these knives. The last one I'm going to show you before I get on to my grub, this guy right here. Another one that everybody should have. This is probably one of the single greatest combat knives ever made. It's that Adams, the MOD, it's that British military knife. This thing, talk about trenching, yeah. Talk about prying, yeah. Talk about cutting, yeah. A lot of people complain it's not too sharp. Oh, they don't come really sharp. They don't need to. They know what it's for. You're going to jab something under somebody. Most guys are wearing body armor, so you're not doing a whole lot of stabbing. You're going to be slashing at fingers, necks, and faces. So this is going to do the job. I don't want this thing coming across my neck. I don't care how dull it is. I just don't want it there. It's going to go through. It's going to penetrate. It's going to be just fine. And you can sharpen it yourself if you really care. This thing is an amazing combat knife. This thing was born for it. The only thing it's missing, again, because it's Geneva Convention approved, it doesn't have anything that's going to be something that literally tears you up and it is detrimental to your health to have inside of you and then outside of you. But this knife, one of the single greatest combat knives on the planet. You can pick this crap up right here. You can pick this crap up right here. And you can call them combat all day long. But when it comes to being in the trenches, give me this one. Give me this one. So mine is going to be nice and wide. It's going to have a nice thick tip. Mine will have a centered point instead of a raised point. So my point will be down here. And I will have all the stuff that makes you bleed. This thing, though, I freaking love this. If you put me in any survival situation anywhere in the world with this knife, I will freaking live. Not only that, but I'll take over a village anywhere. I don't care. I don't care if it's freaking Santa's village. I will take over. This thing right here is an abso-freaking-lute beast. So, combat knives, combat survival, combat fighting, field knives, paratrooper knives, bayonets. There is a huge list of combat knives. So if you hear me say this isn't a real combat knife, I'm pretty much pertaining it to the way it's described, because every knife can be a combat knife. Every knife can be a combat knife depending on how you're using it in combat, right? It's like every knife is a combat gun if you shoot the enemy. Boop. I mean, every gun is a combat gun if you shoot the enemy. So I'll say a lot of things, and I'll say, oh, this thing I would not take into combat for this, blah, blah, blah. As a field knife, you give me this as a field knife all day long. Give me this saying, listen, I'm going to send you into an area and you're going to be behind enemy lines and you're going to need to hunt for your food and you're going to be able to, have to cook your own food. This is a great hunting knife right here. This K-Bar, this is a great hunting knife. This is a better, probably, hunting knife than anything out on the table. If you told me it was just straight up field work and I was going to need just a good utility knife, give me the Glock. This Glock is badass. If you say you can only have one knife out of all these, well, I use this knife more than anything. The D-Bad War Machine, I literally use this knife all the freaking time. This thing is awesome. So this would be the one knife that I would keep out of all these if I had only one choice. If you told me I can only bring one to combat, it would be really hard not picking this, but it would also be really hard not picking this. That's how good this is. This is my supreme combat knife. Why? Because it's tried and true. I mean, it's been there, and it does everything this thing does and more. But, golly, it's hard to turn this thing down. So that's it for this one. But again, the Kislyak Man Hollow Handle Survival X. If you don't have one, get one. You will be happier than a pig in poop. So, I'm going to go ahead and eat some crab and lobster and have a good old time. That's it for this one. Stay green. I am Donnie B all day. Until next knife.